Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda Cities ABC Open Business Council series. And we are here to a new amazing podcast series and interviews. In this time to speak about film, to speak about writing, and to speak about all the motion ecosystem of creativity, and as well what is happening in the film industry, but as well welcome to our series Rohit Karn Batra. Which is has a fantastic background, but as well out of the box, which I like a lot. And I think that's the purpose of these calls and these interviews as well, is precisely to profile personalities that are amplifying and opening the widescreen of both the scope of things, but as well how to touch different areas and industries. So Rohit is a film producer, writer, and director. Originally from India, Rohit Karn Batra wrote, produced, and directed the 2019 crime film Line of Descent, starring Ronit Roy, Brendan Fraser, and releasing worldwide in theaters and video on demand in the United States and on ZEE in India. Rohit, of course, his background is from India. He came from a non-film background. His parents are both teachers, and they went through traditional routes of education and then went to study computer science at the university, and he got his MBA and he started his career in corporate America, which is quite amazing. And soon enough, of course, he came back to one of the things that is one of the biggest passions in India, that is the film industry, but in this case in Hollywood as well, bridging the two worlds. And I think some of his work initially was doing music videos, and then he went to other places of the film and production and line production, and as well has been looking at the different multiple parts of the film industry, and as well understanding from the financial to production, and as well all the different areas that we have. And is as well, of course, producing a couple of new things that we're going to be talking in this interview. So welcome to our series, Rohit. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. I can't wait to have a great chat with you. Thank you.
So I have a huge passion for film myself. I think my first dream was actually to be a filmmaker and an actor, probably when I was 3 or 4 years old. So I think you are, I'm actually going to have a bigger push in terms of the film industry, and I'm actually interested to do, I'm more and more into this. So I want to start with precisely your background. So having coming from, I have a background that is not directly film industry, and actually studied computer science, and you did an MBA, which is quite difficult, but that brings you a huge background.
Advantage, yeah.
How do you end up in film, and as well a bit of that background career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, looking back, it was just a series of, ignorant steps that I made. I didn't know what I was doing, and it just kind of dominoed into a career. But you're absolutely right. Both of my parents are teachers. I was born in Africa, actually, in Zambia, and I came to the States when I was 7 years old. So I've been here, and it was a normal upbringing. I didn't really know any filmmakers. I didn't have a sense of my bearings. My only exposure to people who are, to things outside of film that were related to films was the Oscars. I used to watch that, and I was like, oh, that's how a director looks like. That's how, a cinematographer looks like. That was my only thing. So every year I was looking forward to watch that. But I was always fascinated by more of the construction of a movie. Like, it was just something I gravitated towards. What I mean by construction, the scene setups. Why are the actors looking at each other a little bit longer in this scene? Why is there an overhead shot on this car? Like, why is the action sequence done in 5 shots, not 4 shots? So it was just more of like, why, or like who's making these decisions? How does it, but then, it did elicit a lot of emotional reactions too, like you fall in love with the story, you think about the characters. So I'm like, wow, like that's really cool. Like, why, it was really more of that kind of curiosity. But again, I didn't know anything about films, but I just had this intense desire. So it became an obsession basically over my youth. And I used to watch movies as much as I could. My mom also is a big movie buff, so we used to always watch movies. That was like my upbringing. But my mom always asked questions about films, and talked about things like acting and directing and stuff. So she had like an instinct towards it, and I think that kind of fueled my likeness for it, I would say. Uh, yeah, but you're right. I have a quote unquote normal background. I graduated college with a computer science degree. Uh, I went to New York to get my MBA, and I went to New York for the reason so I could be around people in film. So it was like I could do that, and I could also, pursue a grad degree. But again, I still didn't know I was going to be a filmmaker. I just thought it was a passion of mine. But I describe it as like weights, So the weight of the desire was stronger and stronger, and that eventually tipped the scales. So I did get a job at a big corporate firm, and I was just unhappy there because I felt I was stealing somebody's job. Like somebody's working really hard for this job, and I had no care for it. I did it procedurally, but I didn't really have a sense of like a linear progression in it. I didn't see myself becoming a partner at the firm. I didn't see myself, you know, uh, kind of fighting the politics. I just didn't really have that. But I did have that for film. I wanted to kind of go through the ringer and kind of learn about things and all that. So I mean, like I said, the scales tipped, and I said, I'm 25, now or never. I don't want to be 40, 45, 50 and jump into something. That's not really a professional approach. So I literally left the job, bought a car, and drove across the US, 5 days of driving because I was on the East Coast. And I stopped. Next thing I knew, I was in Los Angeles, and had a lot of time to think. 4 days, 5 days of driving by myself, and I thought a lot about, okay, but I never had any thoughts of I'm not going to succeed or what am I doing. It was all positive, like, oh, I can't wait. I'm gonna do the, it was more of that, again, ignorant steps. Like, you don't think about the negative, even though that's something you have to consider in any endeavor. To me, it was like, oh, I'm gonna go do this. I'll figure it out. Other people are doing it, So that was kind of like my thinking. But then reality hits really hard because no one really cares about you when you come to LA. There's a lot of people here who just come and pursue it, and there's a lot of broken dreams and a lot of broken people because they've been battered by the industry's rejections and not even if they've been successful, maybe not their definition of success. I could care less about that stuff, to be honest. So I just kind of worked like a workhorse quietly, just built my network and figured it out, got mentors, like just in any business, really, any entrepreneurship. So even though I'm in the film business, I consider myself more of an entrepreneur in many ways because there's a lot of overlap in how the ups and downs go and how entrepreneurship works in scale. Nothing happens overnight, but in scale, uh, the uh, the success happens or it doesn't happen. And yeah, and here I am. So that's pretty much the background and the progression of everything.
Really impressive, and I love that passion to first of all to make things happen, and really persistence as well, but as well the sense of a lot of people, especially when it comes, like you mentioned, Hollywood is as well a place of dreams, but a place of broken dreams.
Yes, it is.
And I love the way you put it as well. So can you tell us a bit about from that MBA, so from a computer science to go to film, because of course that brings you as well, because at the moment the film industry is in a very, probably one of the biggest crises in history, because of course it's not just the film industry, but the film industry probably is an epicenter of both technology.
That's right.
Both industry and a lot of different things. So I think that's probably an opportunity, your background and education for that as well. But I would like to hear from how you did that transition, especially like you mentioned, you touch mentors, you touch as well the persistence and the passion for what you wanted to do. But I think a lot of people forget that, because in the end of the day, it's an industry, and it's a very demanding industry, because it's an industry that is periodic. I just want to listen that kind of nuances. How did you start getting this until you produce your first film and start getting really serious on this?
That's a great question. Looking back, in a way, when you don't know anything, you kind of invent it as you go along. So I never really had for example, like the first gig that I got, I was just to make some money. I was doing some like freelance, articles for some like, fourth tier magazines, no one's heard of. But I looked at it as an opportunity because I was in the entertainment writer department. So I was meeting people in entertainment because I was able to get access to them immediately. So, a part of the film industry is kind of finding opportunities. So very instinctively, and I have good entertainment instincts. I figured out, okay, if I meet people in the entertainment space, I can maybe find a job, or maybe I can pitch something or whatever. And it worked. I had an interview with this musician in Washington, no, in San Francisco, and I remember I drove up there to see him, and he was trying to figure out how how to do a music video, because the last one that he did wasn't able to go at his expectations, and he was under a deadline with his label. So I just said, I'll do it. I just raised my hand in the interview, and he was so desperate that he had to get it done next weekend. I figured it out. I just said, I'll make it happen. I live in LA, things like that. So I pitched myself. And again, what I learned, even in that small experience, was that it was an opportunity of demand and timing. And I think that's the genetics of the business, is you have to understand and look for those two things. So I'd always found a way to align myself with timing and figure out the demand of what's in front of me. Or if not, drop a seat. Maybe the demand is in a year, but they'll remember me. So, so once I did that video, then someone else called me, saw it, liked it. And then I was introduced to 3 other people, and I think a lot of it is being likable, because if you're likable, they'll be like, yeah, he was a cool guy. I like working with him, or whatever the case may be. He didn't rip me off, things like that. So I think that's kind of how it started, where it was like one dot and the other dot. It just kind of all jumbled up into a network. And now you know people, and now people just call you because they're like, oh, John said you were great. I have something in a couple of weeks. So are you interested? And that takes a lot of time. And I'm describing what happened over 5, 6, 7, 10 years, but that's how it happened. And but I was always, to lead to your point about my film, those were smaller projects. I was more interested in feature filmmaking. That's really where my MO is. So feature films is a completely different beast, because now you need millions of dollars. It's not doing a small project anymore. So then I said, okay, what do I do now? And it's almost like starting over in a new industry. So I figured out how to raise money. I figured out the dynamics of fundraising, and it was literally, it was death by 1,000 blows, because, you get thousands of rejections. But I did everything from cold calling to networking to you name it. I figured out a way to penetrate networks and personalities of people whom I thought might be interested. And completely trial and error, I was able to raise significant amount of money, and then I made the film. So everything is done literally by shoveling the ground, and like day by day. It's not a very romantic thing you hear where, oh, I just got the money for a film. Like, it doesn't work like that for me anyway. Other people may have had that success line. I literally had to earn every dollar, every project, every phone call, every email. Everything was done very procedurally over many, many years. So persistence is the right word.
No, I love that, and I think I think one of my mantras is definitely about persistence. So I would go right now. So from that persistence, like you said, from the first film, you did the $1 million film. So can you tell us about that? Because I think especially for people listening to us that have some kind of dream about filming, it's interesting to demystify, but as well, you achieved actually quite impressive, especially with Line of Descent, with the kind of start that you got. And as well, what you're still very young, so I'm sure you're going to have a lot of things ahead of you. But just how did you start, especially going from small film to big film? And because you've been as well having both roles as a producer and director, and as well as a writer. Yes. So it's three things that normally you have big authors that do that. And I'm sure that's the way you want to go, but just a bit of that background.
Sure. So the first thing that I did, the first sort of like seed money I got I was like, okay, what do I do now? Because this is not going to make the movie. So again, I have good instincts, and that's who knows the mystery of that. But the first thing I did was get a team of people that were better than me. So I got a good entertainment lawyer. That was the first person I hired because I knew that person had worked on hundreds, thousands, maybe of projects. So they were able to help me understand, okay, how to protect the IP, how to protect the investors' trust, how to do. So he helped me structure that, and he go, here's what you need to go ahead. So it became like a counselor, more than a lawyer, and so I learned the value of that, and then from there, I was able to. I pitched the project around town, and I was able to get a big management company because I love the script to sign me up. So I got signed up by the management company, and that allowed me to go into more of like the higher tier part of the business because now I had access to other people, and it was purely because I had a good script, and they knew I was serious because I was hiring the right people. I wasn't just like sitting around saying I'm going to make a movie. I had a a seasoned lawyer. Then I hired a world-class producer, and I was paying them, because I had some money that I learned from my fundraising abilities. So people start taking you seriously, and then they start to return your phone calls and are interested in what you're doing. And it literally was like I was told what to do, and I just did it. So they were like, you need an actor. So I got an actor. You need this amount to go for this. I did this that way. And I took a lot of risks along the way. Like I did the movie in different buckets. Most people do the movie in one go. I did it in different stages because I was only able to raise a certain amount, and I had an actress for a certain amount of time. So I just called my producer and I said, what do I do? What's the best scenario that I can pull off with where I am? And he advised me, and I just listened blindly to him because he had experience, and his name is Guy Luthen, and Guy and I are very close now because he saw that I actually, unlike other directors, I was actually doing my job properly. I was listening to people. I was like a leader, you filter out the information that's relevant, and but you need to gather all the information, and that's exactly what our director does. And the producer aspect is just more of a ceremonial thing, right? Because I was able to put the project together. And I certainly was a legitimate producer, but I consider myself more of a director first, a writer second, and a producer third, even though people think of the opposite, because I think I'm a producer first, a writer second, and a director third. And I'll take all the credits. I'm happy with all three roles. They satisfy all my urges. So yeah.
That's and I think you have to have the ownership. So I want to touch about precisely ownership, and like you said, take the credit, because the film industry, you have the producers, you have the directors, you have the screenwriters, and at the moment as well, we have all the marketing around the film, which actually, if you look especially at blockbusters, which in the last year, all the blockbusters were postponed or delayed, or actually right now, most of the streaming platforms are having the biggest chunk of the production industry. So how do you see that work, especially from before we go to the industry, from your ownership of the production? And I'm particularly interested to see, as a producer and director, are you trying to create a portfolio of your material and your films and creating these in the future, like you have, I don't know, the collection of Stanley Kubrick, the collections of all these authors? Because this is, I think, at the moment we have like kind of three different variations. I can talk about three or four, but I would say that you have like the authors, like the big names, like from the Kubricks to I don't know, all the Spielbergs and so forth, or the George Lucas and things like that. Although George Lucas created the merchandising part, which comes probably in the second one, that is like the all the series and the kind of merchandising kind of trending companies like James Bonds and Star Wars and Star Treks and stuff like that. And then you have, of course, all the small players and wannabes that are like a second division, but in the end of the day, at the moment, it's massive because you have all these streaming companies that there's a lot of content being produced. So how do you see that your work on this context, but as well you've been making some interesting bridges between Hollywood and Bollywood, although you are mostly educated in the US. So the Bollywood is probably not so close to you, besides probably in terms of family.
Yeah.
I'd just like to hear that part in that level.
Sure. You know, I don't really understand or know Bollywood, to be very frank with you. I used to, but I look at it more as a foreign film. That's probably more accurate. You know, I think when you put a a label on it, expectations come with it, and I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable with that because my movie doesn't really. There's nothing about it that is in that culture, as far as film culture, how they shoot movies, how they whatever, the way I shot it, the way I directed it. I mean, it was completely out of my mind. Not out of like an expectation of fulfilling that label. A corny example is like I don't have any songs and dances in my movies, things like that. But also like the language we use, especially the way I shot the movie. It's a very specific way of shooting a film, which I can, if you want to, get into the nerdy aspect of directing, I can do that. But yeah, to your point earlier, there's all kinds of movies, right? So the movies you mentioned, the Bonds of the world, they're studio films or franchise or institutional projects. I'm in the independent film space, which means that I'm not beholden to, a studio executive's mandate and things like that. I mean, I would love to do a studio film for sure, but in this particular part of my career, I'm in the independent film space, which means that I am the studio. Like I am my whole system, and that's why the team is important because they're your board members. Just like in any company. So a film is a company, basically. You have different roles and different people execute things in their own way to realize the vision of the project. And my job is to present that vision and to sell that vision, really. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully, but that's besides the point.
Yeah. No, and I think so. I want to touch about the independent filmmaking. So when you look at independent filmmaking, of course, you have it's a massive industry because you have the independent right now. From first of all, is a trend in itself. There's a lot of millions of people around the world that are looking for independent filming, me included. And of course, the independent, you have a lot of verticals, a lot of sectors, a lot of things. So
Yeah.
how do you position your work within the independent?
I mean, it comes down to story and execution, right? So when we watch a movie, there's a social contract that the director has with every person watching it. And the contract is, I'm going to give you a unique, cool, awesome story. And I'm going to execute it in a way that will entertain you or make you think or something. That's what you're paying for at the end of the day. So, so to me, if that's when I set everything up, it's to satisfy that contract I have with people I don't know, because they're paying for it or they're expecting to watch it. Even if they, they stream it for free, it doesn't matter. They're still expecting to fill their time by getting those two things done. So anything outside of that is a violation of that agreement. And of course, when you have ownership, you wanna fulfill your obligations. So so to me, independent film space is really to use whatever leverage and power I'm lucky to have, and to satisfy that. So to stand out, great story, great execution. So I study execution, and then I perfect the science of storytelling. Though that's the only two goals that I have when I direct.
Amazing. So, and I think it's in the end of the day, it's all about storytelling. Like I think
that's the name of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like Hitchcock, I think put it very well. There's a quote from him: "Is the first and the second third is about the story," or stuff like that. But well, I want to go back to so let's go right now to your work and some of your films. So you have Line of Descent, that probably was the biggest one. But tell us what you've been doing and a bit some of your work for the people that are not so familiar with your work. I'm sure they will research, but as well what you from past to present and future. Let's put it that way.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So a lot of stuff I've done is more like insulated, right? So you may not have like I've done a lot of work in commercials, maybe not as a director, but we've done different aspects of like we work with on the production level, So I've done a lot of international work as well for either a corporate thing, which was a big part of my business for a while, corporate stuff is like, you have a company that needs to interview their CEO, but they also want to present to like their investors. I work with private equity groups that, like big billionaire CEOs want to come in and project themselves a certain way. So you work on an agency level basically, and you say, okay, here's the best way to shoot it, present it, edit it. So there's a bit of that goes in there. I've done a lot of shorts. A couple of my shorts I've won awards at festivals. So the first short that I ever did, actually the real short I ever did, won like the best short film critics short film at a top 25 festival in the States. So a lot of music videos, smaller artists, and the film takes up a lot of oxygen, so that's that. But then we have different aspects of our business also where we do even in AI space. Like I'm working with a company called AppTech, and they're very important in media tech space which is something I'm very excited about, because they do what's called localization. So they localize content. So if I shot my movie, let's say in English, I want to localize it by language, subtitling or closed captioning. I can do that. Excuse me. I can do that by working with a company like AppTech that has AI that can take the audio and make it Italian, or make it Spanish, or make it Portuguese, and things like that. And so you work with companies like that still in media, still in entertainment, but they're able to make it more accessible to people, and that it makes it more accessible storytelling wise, makes it more accessible in so many other ways. So what I would say is that it's a holistic thing, and a company like AppTech, I mean, they also are really in the media space in other ways. So it's kind of symbiotic. I had a release in the UAE, in the Middle East, at large, and they sponsored the release because they were interested in expanding that. So even though it wasn't me making a product, I was working with the extended media ocean and making it accessible and making it out there. And a company like AppTech is instrumental in that localization process. Regarding the other projects, I mean, I've been doing this for about 16 years now, and the way I describe it is a lot of script consulting. So a lot of people come to me for that, a lot of post-production work, and then a bunch of different projects that different clients have, from the big stuff to the small stuff. So
no, really impressive. And I think I want to touch about film and AI, because it's one area, of course, as you know, I'm being very involved in AI, and actually part of this series is about AI as well, and the challenges. And I actually did a bit of a study about AI in film. But before I go there, so can you tell us about probably your biggest film, The Line of Descent? I think I would like to hear about it.
Sure.
And as well, what is coming after this? But I think it's quite interesting to look at this. Yeah.
Yeah, the AI part of it's definitely interesting. It's a growing sector, and it's a hot sector. I mean, because I'm a tech, I have a computer science degree. Maybe like that never really switched off in the background a little bit. So Line of Descent is it's a foreign film shot in India, but 50% of it's in English. That people don't sometimes understand when they watch the trailer or whatnot. It's half English, and because I'm an American actor, I'm a British actor, I'm a French actress, they speak English, in the film. And even the Indian actors, they speak English, like not majority, but some of the time, I would say. So it's a gangster film about brothers who are fighting over the estate of their father, who kind of was burdened with guilt. And for him, the way to save the family was to leave everything to the most trusted brother, the son. But then the other brothers found that unacceptable. So they start plotting against each other. And there's an arms dealer an American arms dealer who's milking money in India and just kind of enjoying life. And the brothers all interact with him in different ways. And then the arms dealer starts to use the other brothers against each other, so he can kind of get to his end goal. So it's kind of a chess piece. It's a gangster film, but I always hesitate because it's not about the gangster world. It's about the internal dynamics of a family, dysfunctional family, and how they're using excuses to get what they want, but also kind of still be in the world of family by being respectful to each other, kind of playing that front face a little bit, and how the women behind them control the whole thing. And that's, so it gets kind of complex. And while all this is happening, there's an undercover operation going on that's following all the moves. So that complicates everything, because there's a lot of elements of the undercover operation that influences everyone's motivation. So that's what the movie's about. It's a very complex, fun film in another language that I think the audience should check out.
So I think this film is particularly interesting because you reverse engineer. You have Hollywood going to Bollywood or India,
Yes.
and as well you bring a major celebrity and actually one of the biggest actors, Brendan Fraser. So I'm particularly interested precisely with this reverse engineering, because there's not a lot
Yes.
of actually mix of Hollywood and Bollywood, at least successful, point one. And then
Yeah.
point two as well, you launched it purely during the pandemic. So I want to touch these two parts of it. I think that production of launching a film, which is kind of a very tricky for anyone, for a producer, especially to launch a film with major stars, at least one major star that can actually do it. But how did you do the distribution, bearing in mind everything that happened in the last 1 year and a half? There's been a kind of a
it's a great question. So the way it works at the level of film that I'm in, we have a sales agent. The sales agent like sells your movie. So we sold the movie, started selling the movie right before the pandemic. So the market was doing its own thing at that time. So, but it released during the pandemic. So that was the contradiction of it. Even though it looked like a pandemic film, it was actually, the deals were basically done before the pandemic happened. So it was interesting. I mean, it was an experiment for everyone, right? To see how the pandemic affects your release, and it definitely affected it. I don't know how it affected it because I don't have anything to compare it to. I didn't have a normal release in a non-pandemic space, so I don't know. It'll be, maybe the next film will satisfy that. But yeah, overall, I think I think, like I said earlier, it's about timing. So you can work as hard as you want, but if your timing is off by 2 months, then could mean the difference between a movie making money and not making money. It's just as simple as that. So I'll give you an example with Brendan. Brendan was sort of getting back into his groove when I hired him, and now he's doing Darren Aronofsky's next film. And now he's I mean, it's a great role. It's right down the Oscar, in my opinion, the Oscar line, the way the role is set up. But it's a timing thing. I don't know if I could get Brendan now. I hope he would do it, but he's got other projects going on, other things, so I was able to get him at a good time. And so the reverse engineering, I'm saying this because it's always fascinated me. I always like to put contradictions on screen. There's something very exciting about that, because again, execution is a part that falls in the execution bucket, and it adds to the story. So if those two things are satisfied, that's a directorial point on the map for me. So the reverse engineering was, again, an experiment, but also something I think provided a lot of value for people because they have never seen it, and I don't think I know any other film that's done it to this level. And we monitor all the films basically that sort of come out in this ilk. So hopefully answered your question, but that's how I would say it with Brendan and everything.
You answered very well, and actually particularly exciting. So I want to touch 2 areas about what you mentioned before. So the business model of a film during pandemics. I think you just touched that in your case was an opportunity because you got a major star that probably would be less available if it would be probably during the eye part. And sometimes it's the opportunity of a young independent film is that you can pick a superstar, and that is, for instance, Pulp Fiction with Bruce Willis and Travolta that actually helped launch the careers of both of them. But as well, a lot of these things is as well, I'm particularly interested in, this is a channel about business and technology and innovation. How did you deal with part launching the film, all the complexity of COVID, the distribution, and then the business as well? And how do you make money during these times? I think it's important for people listening to us because in the end of the day, everyone will have to adapt to this new normal in a lot of ways.
They will. It's not a fluke. It's not a one-off. I think it's going to be a cultural thing for everyone. So again, what happens is when to understand how films work, I don't know how other films work, but for us, when we have a distribution, they become the de facto owners of the film, even though we own the film. They're able to distribute it as they want. They're able to do whatever they want, basically, to certain, with certain guardrails to the project. So we sold it to many territories across the world, and we literally give them the film, and then they have an obligation to exploit it for revenue. So I think they're probably better skilled to answer it than I am, because our job is to sell the movie, and their job is to make money on the sale. And I think that what COVID's done is it opened up other windows. I think that's the heart of, and it closed some windows. Theatrical is basically closed, sadly, but other windows have opened, because people need to watch content. So I think it's an exercise in adaptation. And regarding making money, like I said, I have many clients that I work with, and I've been doing it for a long time now. So I think that's just like any other business. There's different demands in media space, and that's really how it's set up for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you put it very well, and I think it's a great opportunity as well if you look at it from an out-of-the-box perspective, because of course I think every change creates new opportunities. You just need to deal with that. So I want to touch you touch AI and film. So I think at the moment there's a lot of things. For instance, AI has been used mostly for data prediction. There's a lot of AIs being used to create screens and to adapt to screens. There's a couple of companies looking at trailers to see the technology and see how they engage. For instance, I'm using an AI to create small films about topics of education, and it's working pretty well, Lumen 6. And there's a lot of other things. So can you tell about this? Because you come from computer science and now you're a filmmaker, director, and producer. I'm particularly interested on that. And as well, how do you see eventually using that in your own work and production capacity?
So a lot of filmmaking, especially post-production, is very labor intensive. So basically the height of AI is to really save money on labor. That's the thesis of a lot of AI. I don't think it's specific to film. I think in any aspect. So again, going back to the company Aptech I was working with. So Aptech does like subtitles, so it's closed captioning, right? So the previous model is somebody sitting down and typing everything. The AI model has an engine that understands language and speech and all that, and it's able to do it almost real time. So that's a perfect example of how it helps us, because then if I have to, like, for example, if I sell a movie to, or my sales agent sells a movie to Russia, and the Russians are like, we love it, we just need Russian subtitles, because our audience is Russian. So I can hire a company to manually do that, which is quite expensive. Or you can run it through an AI model and it'll do it in Russian to some level of accuracy. And then you, for the last mile, to just edit it and make sure everything is fine, you hire a human for that. That's one example of it. But also there's other things happening. Like there's, AI in a way has been used for a while in film, because visual effects are kind of an AI, it's able to predict environments. We talked, I think initially about Oprah having a background, in an interview, and it looks like she's actually there. That's AI, because it's able to predict the environment, and it's able to put a subject in it and figure it out. And in pandemic, you may not have the luxury to sit in front of a human being because of health reasons, but it's okay. We have a system, we have a solution for that, thanks to technology. So it would be foolish not to exploit that and develop it. There's some other stuff happening. There's companies that are they able to manipulate speech. There's a lot of tools, like in the weeds, like in sound or in cinematography. There's a lot of stuff you can do with AI for color correction, for sound editing, and so on and so forth. So it's able to use a built-in engine to kind of get to a predictive result that helps to create the creative result that you're looking for. So yeah, there's a big opportunity, and it would be foolish again not to consider it as a part of the business at this point. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think, well, we touched all of these different things, and we're passing almost 1 hour, so I want to be conscious of your time. I think I have a lot of questions here, and I think a lot of ideas, but probably we'll take it for a second. Definitely, I want to do a second one just about the creativity around film. So about this stage of your career, and I think it's quite interesting because you are very well positioned to go in a lot of different directions, because you have both capacity, your own business, production, creativity, and as well technology, which is quite a fantastic alliance. What's your focus right now, and what's the things that you have in the pipeline, if you want to share, of course?
Oh, I'm excited to share. Yeah, I just finished my next script. It's called Accident on Relay Street. It's an American film, and it's a good old American film. You know, it's you know, about the struggles the country is going through, but also people are going through, but in a very American format. You know, so I just there's certain iconography and imagery that I want to use in this film, and you know, we're raising funds for it right now, and we should be done hopefully soon. Is always the goal in raising funds, but yeah, that's a big project in many ways. We have a good short list of talent, and it's a very ambitious execution as well for what the kind of film it is, and I'm very excited about it because you know I read a quote by some painter in the 1800s says, "An artist's career always starts on the next project," you know. So so that's kind of how I see it. It's like Line of Descent was great, and this is the start of the career, and then after this, the next will be the start of the career. So that's how I see it. So that natural energy and motivation comes from, you know, such a line of thinking. Yes.
No, amazing. I love that. And I love as well that it's a great way to wrap up. So I think, Rohit, I want to thank you for your time. I have
Thank you so much.
plenty of things to continue in another interview. And I want to do one about the future of film, if it's okay for you. I'll let this for our audience. We'll start with this one and then go for the next one. Thank you so much, Rohit. It's been a fantastic pleasure. And congratulations for your work, because I know that is not easy to what you achieved. And I think definitely we're going to hear a lot about you, and hopefully we're going to be doing one with the next film, but before that, one about the future of film. Thank you.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you so much. I enjoyed every second of it. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.